All right, good afternoon, everyone. Hopefully still with us here. No food comas, anything like that. So welcome to the next session for today, which will be the power of email actions and reminders. So I am Cody Kester, product consultant here at Qualtrics. With me today, I also have Ryan from our support team. Ryan will be helping out in the Q&A chat. So as we go through today, if you do have any questions, feel free to throw them in the chat box there. Ryan can help out. At the end of our session, if we have some time left, and there's something that, some lingering questions or something we could just talk about and I could show you, we'll take some time there too. Let me see if I can share my screen real quick. There we go. And let's just hop right in here. So today we are talking about emails. That's email reminders, email actions, but there's also just some general email discussions that we'll have to really solidify your understanding of them and potentially give you some new ways to optimize your email communications. So to start, we're going to take a look at the two core aspects of emails, and those are under administration, email actions, and email reminders. The ability to go in and view and edit these are permissions, and they are separate permissions. It's not all emails. There's a permission for email action administration and email reminders administration. Why are they separated? It's because they accomplish very different tasks in the site. So we're going to start today's focus on email actions, and then after that, we'll switch over to reminders and walk you through the difference between the two. So let's start by going to email actions, and we're going to arrive at a pretty large list of all the email actions in our site. I have this set to view all. Your default may only have 10 or 20 listed here. But what we see are a large number of emails. We have the type. There's also an ID that's a little hidden there. There we go. ID, type, action, and subject. So type is where this email is coming from. So this is from the document side of Qualtrics. This is from the user side. This is the test that's generating it. Down at the bottom, we have a workflow calling it out as well. And to the right, we have the action. And this gets down to the core of what an email action is. So an email action is an email that is triggered in response to something in the system. Usually that's a button press. So if we look through here, whenever you reject a document as part of a approval, whenever you press retire and retire a document, whenever you reset a user's account, these are actions that you take in the site, and we want to send an email in response to it. Some of these actions will happen automatically. Things like, if I can find it, there we are, expire. So you don't expire a document. A document hits its expiration date and then it does expire. The system takes care of that, but it's still an action that happens. So the idea here is that we are sending out emails whenever these actions occur. What are the contents of the email? Well, from our list here, we have a subject line. So you can usually get a pretty good idea of what the core of the email is going to look like just from the subject. So let's hop into one of these. Let's take a look at retire. So this is when inside of document control, we retire a document. We're going to send this email. To get more specifics on it, over here on the right, we're going to hit edit. And so we get pulled here into this particular email actions settings. And it's going to be a repeat of some of the info we just saw. We have document control as the module, we have the action of retire, and we have the subject down here. But there's more to discuss. So let's just go down the lines here. We're going to skip over a couple and come back to them. But let's go through sort of the core setup you need for any email action. So right up front, you have the module. This is where in the system this is being generated from. So if we open this up, we can see all the other options. We have tests, We have scheduled tasks, which are background system tasks that work automatically. We have workflows, we have data retention. There's really a lot of actions in your system, a lot more than you might think there are. But this is where we're starting from. We're saying that we want inside of the document control, lost it now. If you just click off of it, it'll stay there. But we want our email to come from document control. As a result of our module selection, the rest of our options will update. Actions here are going to show only actions that happen in documents. There's not going to be user failed a test in here, for example. So again, there are a lot of button presses. We press the approve button, we press the cancel release button, we would press the create button, but we wouldn't press an expire button, for example. So this is for retire. So whenever we press retire and retire a document, we want to send an email out. Who do we want the email to go to? Well, down here we have a recipients box. So the nice thing with recipients is it will update based off the module. So again, this first selection is changing the rest of our email action. It's populated with document-related personnel. So editors, document managers, last action by, approval, review, notify, so on. So we have it set to go to the editor, whoever took the last action, which would likely be the person that pressed retire, and the approval list and the notify list. That's who this email is going out to. Who's it going to? Sorry, I just answered that. Who's it going to? What is it going to say once it arrives in their inbox? So for that, we have our subject and our body. So for anybody that's already taken, and I don't know exactly when it's going on, but if you've taken a course on environment variables, or you're familiar with template and environment variables, you're going to see some familiar terminology here. So we have document ID title has been retired. And so this value we call an environment variable. They're used in a couple places in the site. What these do is they automatically populate with this document's ID and title. So if we retire document 123, this in our email we receive would look like that. If its title was calibration SOP, that's what it would look like. So it will automatically fill in those values. Down here in our body, we have more of the same. So ID title has been retired by, it'll populate the user that pressed the retire button on the date that they pressed it for the following reason, the reason they type in to retire the document. Below here, we'll even have a direct link to the retired document. So setting them up is pretty simple. One like this has actually already been built by default in your site. So you may have this exact email, you may have gone in and edited it, you may have removed it. These are customizable, tweakable. So your exact retired email may look different. That's the whole point of today, right? We want to take these parts of our system that the defaults work fine, but maybe we want to refine them to what we want. So something we could do here inside of this email is we could add some other environment variables. So let's say we wanted to add in, scroll down our list here. I'm going to talk about these duplicates in a second. Let's say we wanted to have the revision number as another piece of info. So these are a list of all of the document variables we can pull in. Again, this is updated because we're in document control. So we could type in maybe like last document revision, and then we just click revision number, and it will automatically pull that value in. So now any email we send out in the future when a document's retired, it'll show the last document revision as well. Now there are these duplicates in here. First of all, the duplication is it's a known defect currently in the most recent version of our software. So we're here in a hosted site and we're seeing it. But the place that these duplications are coming from is these are custom fields. So any of these other ones, these are baseline values that your system's tracking. So date approve, date expire, your system knows that info, but you can also bring in custom values. So in this site, there is location, for example. And so right now, just if anyone's going into your own hosted site and seeing these duplications, any of these will work. So if we also wanted to bring in the location that this document was tagged as, we could do the exact same thing. So emails don't have to have that static system only info. You can also bring in your own customizations that you've built via custom fields. Sections, departments might be another one. So those are most of the settings we've seen on the page. Those are sort of the core functions of an email. Let's talk about some of these other ones though. Time delay. So you can build in a delay if you would like. I've only ever come across one or two very niche, very specific use cases for it. As a result, 0 is the default. If you leave it at 0, that means whenever the action's taken, we send the email. Let's say that you're on a production, you make an inventory request of some kind in a workflow. You may want there to be a delay before the manufacturing side gets the work order because you have to order the parts. So something like that might be a reason to use it, but if you need a time delay, throw it in right there. Send on last only. This is a pretty specific use case as well, but I can show you at least one. So I don't want to make the changes to this. I think it's fine to leave alone. Let's go back to our email actions page. And let's take a look at the approval. So whenever we press approve on a document. So let's read the actual email we've built for this. Document ID title has been published. Document ID title has been edited by the editor and published with the following changes. Revision note. So what have we talked about so far? Whenever this action is taken, we send an email. And what's the action? It's pressing the approve button. That's not the document becoming approved and publishing. That's every time you press approve. So if we have 5 approvers for our document, this email would send out 5 times. And that's not what you want. So anytime you are building an email for a process that requires multiple responsible parties, you can use this send on last only. What that does is it waits on the very last person to sign off and approve, and then it will send the email. This is useful in documents for approve. This is useful in trainings if you have sign-off personnel that require more than one person. So if you have a sign-off group for a safety training, let's say, and 3 people need to validate it, you could build that email and set it to send on last only. Additionally, in a workflow, if you have a route that requires all responsible parties, maybe like a management team, the email that you would build for that, just send it on the last only. Now, I'm going to give you some examples of when we would use this triggered by a list field. I'm also going to show you some other groups that we can send this content to. To do that, though, we're going to start talking a little bit about some ways that you can really build out workflow communications. For the most part, your email actions for your documents should be set and should be fairly functional. We have some system defaults. You see these negative values. Those should be in your system. If they're not, it's completely fine. You may have replaced them with your own. Either way, the document control is for the most part taken care of. So where a lot of users like to get in and customize the scope of their emails is workflows. We expand this out to show all of our email actions. We'll see a lot of workflow ones. And if we look, the email itself is actually the exact same for nearly all of them. Something like this has been updated, but these are all using a system default. And so whenever you import a workflow, be it from us, if we send you like a best-in-class workflow, if you get a copy of that, or a colleague sends you a workflow they've built, it's going to use your default workflow email for all of the email actions for every route. So let's first take a look at where that setting is in case you want to tweak it. So under administration, you'll need the system settings permission. I think it's system settings administration. You wouldn't come in here very often, but the last tab of this page has workflow, and this is where that language is. Now keep in mind, you do most likely want this to be pretty generic. You would want this to be pretty generic because this could apply to any workflow in your site, right? So you don't want to have one value that's only going to appear in one workflow. But if you do want to have your system default tweaked a little bit, this is where you can do it. So it sounds like we might have a user seeing if we can zoom in a little bit. Whenever we get back to our email actions page, I'll zoom in a little bit and kind of review everything just to make sure everyone can see it. So this is where that default's coming from. If you were to create a new workflow right now, this is what your email actions would say. So if you want to update that, this is the place to do it. Changing this will not change your existing emails actions that have already been built. So do keep that in mind. So let's go back to our email actions list. There's a lot of info on this page and the other one, so I can't zoom in too much. Whenever I get back into the settings, I'll see what I can do. But in here, we have all of these different email actions. Now, email actions are, again, triggered by an action. So these are, for the most part, going to be when you are pressing a route. So whenever we move from one step to another, let's send an email. We have a nonconformance report workflow here. We have the route that is nonconformance details entered. We have review complete, and we have workflow launched. So whenever the review is complete, what happens? Let's take a look at what a typical workflow email is going to do. Let's see if I can zoom in just a hair here. There we go. Let's see how this works. So whenever we zoom in on the workflow action here, we'll see that there's no time delay because we want to send the email immediately. We're going to send an email to responsible parties. Now, the way this works is the route will send the email to the next batch of responsible parties on the next step. So the way this workflow is set up, I'll go ahead and pull it up here on the side. I'm going to open up workflows. And I'm going to go to our nonconformance report workflow right here. And we can see real quick the steps involved. So there's nonconformance details. This is somebody typing up what the issue is. They press a route. It takes it to a review step. QA reviews it. And then we send an email. We send an email and we push it forward to launching a corrective action. So that email that review complete sends, we'll send it to whoever picks up the next piece of work, which in this case would be whoever's going to pick up this workflow that we launch. The same thing would happen above. So nonconformance details entered. Whenever we press that button, the email will go to the next set of responsible parties, which would be whoever's set up in this review step, QA typically. So that's the system default. Now with that, this email is only triggered by this button. This one we're looking at is only triggered when we hit review complete. So if we want to change some of the language here, we can. This email is only going to happen when we say that a corrective action is good to go. Let's go ahead and launch it. So this generic info we have here, we can actually be more specific with it. So instead of workflow title ID, we could just say corrective action ID has been assigned to you. Down here, space this out a bit. We could say car, a little more shorthand with it. So car ID has been assigned to you. We could even go up here. If we look at our environment variables, it's pulling the custom fields out of our workflow. So we could scroll down here and we could grab our nonconformance report. This is a subform we use in that workflow. Put it in the wrong spot. So before we even hop into Qualtrics, before we log in and do anything, we'll get an email saying we have a corrective action we need to take care of. And we can see the nonconformance report that we'll be working with once we get into the site. So it's a really nice way to give your users a heads up and personalize every communication. So this takes care of the next person that's picking up the work. Let's save it. And now in our list here, if I can find it again, you'll see that we've updated this email. So that's great. That'll make the person picking up the corrective action and starting root cause analysis, give them a heads up, and just help them get their work started. Now, whenever let's say that I submit a nonconformance report. I type in that something happened and you might want to look into it. That's probably the last time that I hear back about that nonconformance report. I don't know, unless I go look for it, I don't know what happened to it. I don't know who processed it. I don't know if any action was taken, if it was ignored. You're kind of left out in the cold. So you can actually add multiple emails that go out with single button presses. So this is whenever we hit review complete. So what we can do is we can go to the very top and we can just build another email that goes out when that action is pressed. So let's find that module. This is our nonconformance report. What's our action? Our action, we have, what you'll see is it's the route and then the step that route lives on. So it helps you find it if you have similar named routes. And this is our review complete on the review possible nonconformance step. You will see in here some of the other options that you may have if you want to customize further. So changes saved, if a workflow expires, you might want to send an email out. But this is what we want. Review complete, review possible nonconformance. Time delay, just leave it blank. It'll default to 0 after you create it. And we don't need to send this on last only. We still haven't got quite to triggered by list field. I promise I have an example coming up. It's right at the end. So we're already sending an email to the next responsible party. So we're keeping the work moving forward. But maybe once we complete our review, we want to send some communication back to the initiator, whoever started this workflow. And we don't need to have probably too much info here, but we could say something along the lines of nonconformance, could throw in the ID, has been processed. Thank you for your submission. Just to give your initiators a little closure on a process that they started. Because once it closes out, they're probably not going to hop back in and dig around to see what happened with it. It could be a lot more wordy with this response. You could bring in some additional environment variables, but I think that would be enough. Once we hit save, it's now put in our list. I will show you, it will actually appear at the very bottom, not in line with those other actions. And so here's just a little Qualtrics tip for you. These do order by ID, which is usually fine. But back here at the top, you can reorder them by just clicking on these values at the top. So if we wanted to reorder them by type, That will group them all together, and we can see all of our nonconformance reports together here. So we can see even for these two actions, we have 2 emails going out. So with workflows, very nice, very helpful. If you have a lot of them, it's a little difficult to manage from this page. It's just a lot of info. So people are having difficulty seeing the screen, so you can hopefully understand that. So where I like to manage my workflows, my workflow emails, is actually in the workflow definition itself. So let's scoot back over here. Hopefully I can zoom out a little bit. And let's take a look at this route, the review complete route that we've been editing. You'll actually see a list of the email actions right here at the bottom. So if we needed to go in and change the language, we could have just came to this, this route, clicked on this here, and it opens up that exact email in another tab. You can't create a new email action from this page. You will have to go to Administration Email Actions. But if you want to edit existing ones, this is a fast place to do it. So if we wanted to go to our nonconformance details entered and change its email, it's this one right here. So we could update the language right from there. All right, so let's finally talk about a use for this triggered by list field. So on review complete, we have an email that goes out to whoever's picking up the corrective action. And we have a confirmation email saying, thanks for submitting to the initiator. Now, with certain nonconformances, there might be certain criteria that are hit that would necessitate other users be pulled into the process. So let's say we want to build a third email action for when we press this button. Let's open up our email actions again. Let's create one more. I think this is the last one we'll build today. So we want to go to that same module. So nonconformance report, action, same button. But what we want is we want to have this email only go out if a certain criteria is met. So we have 2 list fields in this workflow. Source, I think, has these values here. So if we wanted it to go out whenever a customer feedback was the reason, we could. Let's think about if work was stopped. If work was stopped, maybe a management group would want to know that that happened. A management group that's not necessarily involved in the workflow. So what we could do is we could say if work is stopped, so if the value equals yes, then we send this email. So it's like an if-then statement. If work stopped equals yes, then this email we're about to type out, we'll send it. If work stopped equals no, this email doesn't send out. You also can choose a negative value. So you could say if it doesn't equal this value, then send it. So who do we want to send it to? Well, we want to send it to a management group, but they're, again, not necessarily tied in as responsible parties. They're not necessarily collaborators. We may not select them in the workflow. So you can always hit add groups and users, and this will pull up your entire group list. You can pick individuals in here as needed. So if we just need to send it to Kimberly, we can do that. But maybe we would want our director of quality to receive this email. So this is a special email just for the director of quality, only if work is stopped. And our subject could be NCR ID with work stops. Maybe it's just a communication, maybe there's no action required, but we just want to let them know. And in here we could put, again, that nonconformance report. And they would get in their email nonconformance report, which actually is a subform A lot of users don't think you can use subforms email actions, but you can. It will pull the table straight into the email, even if it has multiple rows. So this would be a nice way to just communicate under these conditions to management. Let's save it. And now we have, with one button press, up to 3 emails that can go out, but they all accomplish different goals. If we check back in on our workflow, see if we can refresh it, and we'll see all of those email actions right there. So as far as setting up email actions, that's the core of it. One other note I do want to make. So we have emails set up for documents. Most of the options are available there. We have emails defaulted for workflows. And we do typically have emails defaulted for tests, so when tests are assigned out. The ones that you will need to go in and build manually, some people will miss this, is for trainings. So there's not a generic all trainings email. You would need to go in, and if you build a new training, you'll want to find it in the list. So like a bloodborne pathogen training. And you would want to at least create an assigned email for the trainee. Ideally, if your training has completion and effectiveness sign-off users, you would want to build 3 emails. So it would be assigned to each. There are additional ones you could go in and build as needed, but that tends to take care of the core assigning. So keep that in mind as you do go and build trainings that before you really get them online, you're going to want to have some emails go out. Otherwise, they might hit a user's inbox, sit there for 3 weeks, and they won't even know they were supposed to check it. Okay, so we're about to transition over to email reminders. I do want to pull up a pretty nice resource in the help guide real quick. So let me open up the help guide. You can search for email actions, email reminders. Our search function works quite well. But also under administration, we have email settings and we have items for both. Something in this page that I find pretty helpful, especially when you're kind of thinking about emails in your site. This is a list of all the potential actions. So as opposed to going into that one list and jumping down and then seeing what actions update, you can take a look at them all right here. And there's some emails that aren't built into your system that you might want. If somebody deletes a document, maybe you want to get an email for that. If somebody locks themselves out of their account, maybe you would want to send an email to one of the admins that has personnel capabilities so they could go in and unlock their account. So this is a handy resource. It should contain every value that you could potentially create an email for. The only one that won't show is workflows, just because it'll show workflows, but it won't show every step of a workflow or every route, because you build your own routes inside of workflows. So as you go through, give this a shot and also play around with it. The formatting that you type in here should look the way you present it. If you want to get fancy with it, you can also switch over to HTML. Let me give you one quick example of this. So like for this email here, however we type it in is how it should appear. But you can also switch it to HTML. And inside of here, you could put some like line breaks, you could bold some items, and you could inject some other hyperlinks. That might be a little more advanced, but if you're into HTML, it's supported. All right, so it's a lot of info on emails. Let's talk about email reminders. These actually serve 2 functions. For most people, the actual email itself is the minimal part of this discussion. These are both email reminders and system reminders, if you will. So the idea is that the values we have on this page are doing 2 things. They are going to generate emails when work becomes late. So we'll take a look at it. We'll see how these emails are set up. But As important / more important, these are also setting the due dates for those items. So if we pull up my inbox real quick, I think I've got a couple items in here. So let's look at like a test I have on the right. It has a due date. This due date is coming from an email reminder. These due dates are from an email reminder. These workflows I have here do not have due dates. It's because these workflows, well, these two in particular, were built for user conference, and we're not talking about email reminders there. So if we don't have an email reminder, we actually never have a due date. These items never become late. So we'll talk more about that. Let's see how they're set up. Some of the dates don't quite line up with the text here. So I want to focus on these test ones because they do. Again, this is a test user conference site. It looks a little funny. We have 3 line items for tests. We have you have had test in your inbox for at least 7 days. What is that affecting tests? What type is it? Approaching due date with a 7-day offset. So if we check back in our inbox, you'll see these statuses at the top. We have newly added, approaching due date, late, and expedited. So this is a sequential order of lateness. So almost late, it is late. Oh boy, it's super late. So if we look here, 7 days after it hits our inbox, it turns to yellow. And it says, all right, we're getting closer to it being due. The next line is tests have been in your inbox for at least 14 days and are considered late. So after 14 days, they now become proper late. We go even further. We have an email that says at least one person you manage has tests to complete that they have not processed for at least 21 days. That is a super late, expedited, and that's a week after it's been past due. So these are our 3 statuses. This is a soft late. This status here is what determines the date that appears here. So even though this will change to a yellow status a week before, the late on date will remain 14 days from when it was assigned. So the only value we're picking that determines what appears on the calendar is late. This is a early warning, and expedited is an actual email that goes to your manager. So I'll show you where those managers are decided. That might be a little refresher from groups. But let's take a look at what's actually generating these. Let's take a look at this late status. I'm going to click here. It's going to let us edit it. So at the top, we have type, and this is which status we're picking. So late, what is late? We are picking items from our inbox. So if we open this up, we can see potential inbox items. Quite a few different workflows, and then your essential document, test, and training features. So this is for tests. Module automatically updates. If I wanted to type in here, I can. So you don't have to worry about that. Offset frequency, 14 days from when it hits my inbox. So the day that I'm assigned something, I have 14 days to complete it before it becomes late. And then we have our email. So subject, intro, and body. Looks a little different than email actions. So why do we have a subject, intro, and body instead of just a subject and body? So the email notifications that go out will say, tests have been in your inbox for at least 14 days. The following tests, multiple, are late and require your attention. So what happens is these emails that send out are aggregate emails, meaning that if we had 3 tests, we would get 1 email with the info displayed 3 times. So these are designed to make it to where you only need to build 1 email and you only receive the 1 email. Now you can split those up. That's this option here on the right for independent emails. This tends to just spam people's inboxes because these emails are all going to be sent at the same time. So as opposed to getting one email that says you have 4 things past due, you would get 4 emails back to back to back to back that all have a single line item. So the default is this is unchecked. I'd probably recommend you leave it unchecked. All right, so that's what's generating this due date. Fun little fact about this due date is it is based off the time it entered the inbox. So if we make a change to it, if we say 30 days and save it. So before I refresh my page, it shows it's due on the 4th. Let's refresh my inbox. I just made myself a little extra time. So if, after user conference, you go back into your site and you start poking around and making some changes, do understand that these offset times do immediately affect all items in the inbox. So that was a test we updated. If we did a training, the same would happen. If we did a document or a workflow, it instantly updates. Same thing would happen if we want to see what a late status looks like. I put that item in my inbox yesterday. So I think, let's actually do this. Let's say 2 days. No, let's do 0 days. So the day it enters my inbox, it becomes late. It's not very fair. Now we'll see it's that late status. So if we had it set to where this is, the late status is the same. So let's put it back to its default of 14 days. And let's see what approaching due date does to that. So let's say once it hits our inbox, we immediately want it to say that we need to start working on it. The only thing that will happen is this will change to yellow. There are some emails associated with it. We'll get to the email discussion. But as far as our inbox here, it'll change to yellow, but that yellow does not affect the actual due date. The due date only comes from the late status that we pick. Same thing with expedited. If we changed expedited to be, the same day or the day after, it wouldn't affect what is displayed here. So you've got a little bit of flexibility there. I'm going to change all these back to their defaults. So after a week, we start getting notifications that they're late. We start getting notifications that say we've had a test in my inbox for 7 days. So they're not late yet, but maybe work on them. After 14 days, that email changes to test have been in your inbox for at least 14 days and are considered late. The status updates to be the orange color. And then expedited hits a week later, and our manager starts getting emails, and then this changes to a red color. So how does a manager get emails if we have the expedited status? So quick refresher for you. Under administration groups, one of the settings you can configure for any group is a manager for that group. So let's say we have this agents group here. We see Alice Brown is in bold. This means that Alice Brown is the manager for the agents group. To add a manager, you just right click, and instead of adding members, you add managers. This option only appears once the group has been enabled. So if this group was disabled, it would not allow us to add managers quite yet. So if Daniel here becomes late, Alice will not get an email. But if Daniel becomes expedited and super late, then Alice will start receiving email notifications. And this would apply. She's the manager for all of this group. So if Daniel, Roger, and Sean are all super late, she'll get emails for each one of them. Managers are optional. So you don't have to have managers in groups or anything like that. We can pull her out. But if you do want to use that extra escalation at your organization, make sure two things are done. Make sure you have an expedited status, because again, even if you have all your managers set up, if you don't have an expedited status, those emails will never send. So make sure you have expedited email set, and make sure you have managers. All right, so inside of here, we've got those the test ones we looked at, which are built out. There aren't too many that are defaulted in your site, so if you've never gone in and built additional ones, you probably only have these first 5. Start with a negative value, which are your core document functions. So for email reminders, you will need to build these out for most other items in your site. Now, testing and training are fairly simple because these apply to all tests and all trainings. The only additional training items you would want to build would be, let's go to create one and I'll show you. You would want to make sure that you have notifications for trainings to complete, trainings awaiting completion sign-off, and trainings awaiting effectiveness sign-off. So 3 in total, with it, I would say at least a late status. If you want to build all 3 levels, then that would be 9 total. You would have an approaching due date, a late, and an expedited here, and then the same for each one of these. Now, the nice thing is once you've built these out, you're good to go. You don't really need to manage them too much. If you want to adjust the due dates, you can do that, but they tend to manage themselves once they've been built out. Now, workflows are a little different. So if we look at workflows, we actually have further drop-downs. And you're able to build email reminders per step. Because some parts of workflows may be under a tighter time constraint than others. Something like a vendor approval, you might want to have the QA review happen within a week of the approval. But the initial, you might want the QA review and approval to happen within a week of submission. But the first step of a workflow, as you're typing in the vendor info, you may not even need a due date for that. So until I'm ready to submit the info in the first place, I don't need a due date. Same thing with the close step. You're not going to need to build a due date for a close step. When it's closed, it's done. So it may look like a lot of work, but it allows you to be flexible, and a lot of these steps probably don't need due dates. So keep that in mind. Now, something that's really nice here is if we go back to our email reminders page, I can give you one last example of a reminder. And that is for this workflow we're using in one of our other sessions. It says assignments are late, and they're late after 0 days. That doesn't sound very fair. Let's take a look. So it's late once it hits this step of a workflow after 0 days. But this is not 0 days from the inbox. This is 0 days from a custom date. So with workflows, in particular, this is where you would use them. You can build them elsewhere. It's just pretty uncommon. But in a workflow, you can have custom due dates based off of values and custom fields that you populate in the workflow. So in this workflow, we fill out a field called assignment due date. And that assignment due date will appear in our inbox. So let's see if I can give you maybe a quick example of that. Let me change this over to another one. Does it have a due date? This one does not. Let's see what we got. I may not have one handy, unfortunately, to show you, so you might just have to take my word for it. It's part of the user conference fun is we have to take stuff offline and online in between sessions, so I think everything's offline right now. But take my word on it. If we go into that workflow and we fill in an assignment due date, that is the date that would appear inside of here. You know what, maybe we do have one still online. Aha, we sure do. All right, define mission, Tuesday session. Look at that. Okay, so sometimes you may need to refresh this when you update it. Assignment due date. Save that. And let's fill this out real quick. If you attend my workflow automation session, you have a little bit of fun in here. Minimal amounts of fun. Assignment. I don't know. What are we doing? Drive, car, off a cliff, onto a helicopter. Sounds like a cool mission. Codename helicopter. I like that. And what's our due date? So let's say it is September 29th. So this is now assigned to us in our inbox. And if we go to our inbox, it's due on the 29th. So that flexibility, again, primarily exists in workflows. It's not too often you're using custom fields for dates in documents. You can, just infrequent. So if you want to go in and customize some of your workflows and have these dynamic due dates, that's the best way to do it. Instead of using a custom field, or sorry, instead of using the inbox, use a custom date instead. It's about setting up all your email reminders. We have due dates and we have emails with text that we're going to send out. When are we sending these emails out? Is it the day that they become late? If that is the case, then when's the next time we send it? Is it every hour? Is it every week, every month? So that is determined in another spot of the system that you don't visit too often. So I'm going to go under administration, system, nope, not system settings, scheduled tasks. So administration scheduled tasks. There is a scheduled task in here for email reminders. So Qualtrics email reminders. And this is when we want to send the emails out. The system default we have here is your system default. So if you never adjusted it, right now you would get an email once a month at the beginning of the month at midnight telling you everything you have that's past due. When would you get that email again? The next month. You'd get it once at midnight. So the frequency of these email reminders is up to you. Some people like the more lengthy ones. You can hit edit here on the right, and you can update this to your heart's content. A lot of users pick either between weekly or daily. Daily emails can seem like a lot, but keep in mind it's only going out to users that have work that's past due. So let's say we set it to weekly. So if we leave it like this, we set it to weekly. The next execution date is the 1st, which is a Friday at midnight. So Thursday at midnight. I don't think that's a great time to get reminded of all the work I need to do for the week. So if we set it to maybe go off on Monday the 27th, so we would type in 9/27. Instead of midnight, maybe like, not 2, maybe 10 in the morning. I can type, I promise. There we go. Wow, that's a struggle. Okay, maybe 10 a.m. in the morning. So what this would do is it would send it next Monday at 10, and then it would do it every week after that. So every Monday at 10, you could expect an email with all of your late work. You could do the same thing with daily if you would like. Now, we're getting close on time. There is one last little piece I want to talk to you about that does not have to do with email actions or reminders, but it's a question we get often, which is if you want to communicate tasks that are open to users outside of like management groups. So without using an expedited status, without using anything like that, how can I communicate that there is work that is late to like a core management group? And just one suggestion I have for you is done via reporting. So let's hop into reports real quick. And we have like a workflow, let's see, corrective actions here. We have a workflow report built for corrective actions. So for any custom report you build, you can put in all the values you'd like, all the fields, all your filters. And what you can do is you can build a report that's automatically sent out here. So if we're trying to think about work that's open and past due, that would be work that is active. So workflows that are active. So what you could do is we could just run this report. Right now there aren't any, which means we're good. We're caught up, no open corrective actions. But we could make an instance up here at the top and call it open cars. And you can save the report instance and schedule the delivery. And what this does is it allows you to send to a group or a list of individuals. So we could go in here and we could just pick J. But this allows you to send a report periodically with all of the open instances of corrective actions, let's say. So if there's a management group, if there's like a director of quality, maybe you would want to receive a weekly email. So starting Monday at 8 a.m., you could send this once a week. The default email here will send an Excel copy of the report straight to them. So they don't even have to log in. They can just see it and review it. If you have inbox or both, inbox is your Qualtrics inbox. Both will send it to your Qualtrics inbox and your email. So that's another quick way that you can communicate to management that work is not getting done because they get a weekly list and see that, okay, this corrective action's been open for, a month. We need to do something about it. All right, well, we are right here at time. I'll check in with Ryan and see if we have any open questions.
Sure. So I had a couple. First one is from Cheryl. She's asking, when they added a vendor workflow from Qualtrics, it auto created a set of email reminders. Is that correct?
It should not. If it does, that would be a cool functionality. Somebody may have gone in and built those. That is not the intended function. Typically, you're going to need to go in and build the reminders yourselves. The actions will be created. But yeah, if email reminders appeared, that is new information to me.
I think she may have been referring to the email actions.
Okay, yes.
Because there's a second part of the question. She didn't understand the difference in changing the workflow message from the system settings or in the email action section.
So the answer to both those questions is the same. So under system settings here, this workflow email here, whenever you import a new workflow or whenever you're building a route and create a default email action, this is what it uses. So whenever you import like a best-in-class workflow, as it's being imported, it's building these email actions, and this is where that template is coming from. So if you wanted to update the language on any new workflows that you build yourself or any workflows you import, this is where you would change that. If you don't change it, then this is what your email actions will always say by default.
And then one more. Can you expand on why we don't have different email reminders for different trainings and tests? Is that something that we're looking to add maybe in the future?
I can tell you it's definitely a feature request. I've dug around on our AHA site and I've seen it as a feature request. Any further information than that is a little bit beyond me. Apologies for not giving you a solid answer there. I can definitely tell you that I have seen other customers that have voted on that in our AHA. Definitely, stay tuned. Make sure you're checking in with the release notes if in the future that does pop up as something on the horizon. you'll get that answer then. And so we are at time here. If we do have any other questions that we didn't get to respond to, please feel free to reach out to services@qualtrics.com. You've seen that in probably some other slides. I don't have a closing slide with that here, so apologies. But if you have any other questions about emails or any of the content from this week, just shoot it over to services@qualtrics.com and we'll get back with you. So thanks again, everyone, for attending, and we'll see you in the next session.